Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music, Money, and Life podcast, the 2017 edition. This podcast, as always, is brought to you by howtolicenseyourmusic.com. If you make music and you'd like to learn how to make money licensing your music in TV shows, films, ads, and so on, go to howtolicenseyourmusic.com. When you go there, there's a free newsletter that you can sign up for. And when you do that, you'll get a free 202-page ebook all about how to make money licensing your music in TV shows, films, video games, ads, and so on. So this year, 2017, my plan is to do one podcast a week. I'll be releasing podcasts every single week on Mondays. So look for new interviews. I have a ton of great guests lined up already this year with supervisors, publishers, songwriters, producers, a variety of people working in the music licensing business. So I'm really excited for this year. I'm going to be creating a ton of content, podcasts, YouTube videos. I'm going to do a blog every week and a whole lot more. So stay tuned to this podcast for details. In the meantime, let's get to today's interview. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Music, Money, and Life. Today, on today's episode, I'm speaking with Suzanne Hilleary from a company called Wacbiz, and you guys are based out of New Jersey, correct?
Well, actually, more around the Woodstock area, upstate New York and New Jersey. Businesses did start in the Jersey City, Hoboken area, and we also have a presence because of the musicianship in the upstate New York, Woodstock area.
Okay, very good. And I believe, Suzanne, you founded your company in 2003. Do I have the timing right?
Yep, you are absolutely right. A year before iTunes launched, I saw a need of bands not getting deals, bands being dropped, and a difficulty post-September 11th, and thought that the best thing to do to expose artists was through licensing to film and TV and documentary.
Excellent. Well, that's what we tend to focus on here on the Music, Money, and Life podcast. And so I guess my first question for you, Suzanne, like one of the things that strikes me about your company that's maybe a little bit different than some of the other companies and founders I've interviewed is that you have a lot of like pretty well-known established artists on your roster. Artists like OK Go, Joe Jackson, the Zach Brown Band, Suzanne Vega. These are some pretty heavy hitters. How did you attract such known names in the industry?
Well, I was very fortunate out of college for 5 years to run RPM Music Productions for Tony Bennett and his son Danny Bennett, who actually he's now the president of Verve Universal Music. And through that, I met so many wonderful people, and from there went on to launch my own company that pitched and played songs to Carlos Santana, the song Smooth, and working with Robbie Rosa, Ricky Martin, Mark Anthony, Jewel, and Cyndi Lauper, the likes thereof. And I maintained a friendship with managers and direct to artists, and so I swung back around to those artists directly, also went to BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC and asked who was independent, who needed help, who would want somebody like myself to non-exclusively, and that is a key word today, non-exclusively work with them. And that's how it built from word of mouth, actually, no advertising, just going right to artists and managers and musicians and bands, having Steve Ferroni from Tom Petty's band, people like that. It's just been really an honor and just, maintaining these friendships to this day.
Awesome. That's really cool. So my question for you is, I know you have around 900 or so artists on your roster. How is it in terms of?
It's about 1,200. I need to update my website. It's a little over 1,200 right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just going on your website. So
by the website.
So about 1,200. So my question is, how does it work out in terms of you have some really known artists and then obviously others that are lesser known? Is there a sense of sort of competition? Do the lesser known artists have a harder time getting placements, or how does that work?
Actually, the lesser-known artists, right now, I mean, to be extremely honest, in the year of 2017, in this 21st century, I mean, it has become harder and harder, as there's a lot of free and kind of, stock kind of companies out there going at it. But I don't think it's any harder either way. In fact, sometimes independent bands, lesser known, that would take less money, maybe a couple of $100 for a track, would have, a better shot at these independent, low budget films than somebody, let's say a more known artist who is they're not demanding, actually, they're pretty easygoing, but they want a higher amount. And so I would say, it's hard whether you're famous, it's hard whether you're emerging in indie. It's just a very competitive thing right now. I mean, the last placement I did was for John Harold, a deceased, very, very solid Americana blues artist from Woodstock, New York, whose estate very kindly, when I came to them with a PBS documentary on the mining industry that wanted some old-time blues from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, I said, well, I work with John's estate. So here we have somebody, who isn't even alive, whose estate and whose friends and family are thrilled that he is going to be now featured in a PBS documentary. So, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason, really. It's just having the right tune for the right request, and they're very varied. And as you know, it just depends. It's very subjective as to the directors and producers and what they're looking for. So we just try to find whatever it is.
Absolutely, that makes sense. But so with that said, Suzanne, what can artists? Because there's a lot of artists that they look to licensing as a somewhat reliable revenue stream, in an era where people don't buy music as much as they used to. It's harder to make a living in general as a musician. What can artists do? Because it is really the right song at the right place at the right time. But if you're trying to break into licensing, do you have any sort of advice in terms of how to approach writing music for licensing?
Well, I think commercially speaking, is indie and ethereal and sort of like angry or whatever you want to be in your song. It's never to me, because I came from artist management. Artists always create what they want to create, but to have a general sense of this is an area they want to be in, to watch some major network shows, to actually get out and see a La La Land, for instance, like be on top of what's coming up right now in the Oscar season, and to understand that you need a little bit for everybody. But I think that the key thing is definitely being. I mean, we're one source. It's really a lot. We're just a mere line in the water of all the other areas and other independent non-exclusive companies they could be with, because we don't all have the same contacts. And I would say my biggest thing about when you're writing is always maintain instrumental tracks. You can do your song with your lyrics and the way you see it, but whilst you're mixing the record, always mix it down with either backing tracks clearly or just straight instrumentals, because a lot of times when I'm delivering, they'll say, could we also have the instrumental? Because you have more play. You could have the song in, let's say, an opening title, but interstitially in between the scenes, they could be clipping and using pieces of the actual instrumental and keeping the sort of feel and the vibe of the music from the very beginning. That would just be, one of the more professional points that I would say, is to always have instrumental backing tracks to the songs that you've created.
Absolutely. Always have instrumentals. That's advice that I give out. What about this question, Suzanne? Inspiration versus like trying to write a song, hoping that it's going to work for like a specific TV show or a specific film. The writers that you work with, do they tend to just bring complete finished ideas to you, or are they writing with specific goals and specific places in mind?
Well, it used to be really specific and I'd have a lot of lead time and everything else. Now I'm finding, again, and being very honest, it's very competitive and it's not as busy as it used to be, really, in all honesty. I find that it's the 11th hour. It's like having everything complete, mixed, mastered, finished. We don't really have time to go out and create. Composers come to me all the time, and it's just, that's even harder because there are, in Hollywood, of course, those main companies that manage composers like the Howard Shores of the world and things like that. There's a, so I'm fine, even though like Wacbiz started off as a writers and artists cooperative. It's a cooperative of writers, artists, and composers. It's yes, I'll do instrumental sort of a composer type placements, but that even has become more and more competitive as well. I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but just to be clear about that. But I would say right now our forte is really having mixed, mastered, finished material that is available, and also that I know I can license it, within 24 hours. I could come back and say, I've gone over this with the client, the composer, writer, or the producer, whoever the tracks have come from, and make sure that, yes, that these monies and this usage is amenable to everybody. So, I'd like to say, in my business right now, it's really the finished product. It's not really writing specifically for anything. And if it's specifically for something through our database, I can query by, if they're looking for something about, apples or something about diamonds or something about candy, I could come up and find, a list of songs with that in the hook and try to go at it like that. So to be honest, I'm not really working out front enough on any project that I'd have time to go and give all the specs to somebody to come up with something specific.
Okay, so something that you said, and this is something that I've been hearing a lot lately from different people that I've interviewed, sort of in one form or another, but I'm hearing a lot about, obviously we all know the music licensing business, the music business in general is very competitive, but you've mentioned that it's becoming more competitive. What do you attribute that to, Suzanne? Is it just that there's more music out there, there's more people trying to break into this, or are there fewer opportunities? What's your take on that?
I just think, one of the I don't want to say systemic problems, but, production companies, and people on top of the budget from the very beginning, they don't really earmark enough money. Music is the last afterthought on a lot of projects that I've seen, and they come at it, late in the game, towards the end. They've got a lot of temp tracks in, and they're trying to, get a Bob Dylan song that sounds like that because they can't afford or license Bob Dylan, even though I tell them we'll go at CSAC to be able to do so. But and that's the other thing too. A lot of times I'll end up licensing things and clearing things because I know how to go about it. I could go to a Harold Arlen for Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I know enough with the publishers today that what I even do is reach out and help them just clear things that they want, that they have a wish list for, that they can't do. I even did that with Message in a Bottle for Sting recently, because that's the whole thing too. Keeping your music supervisors, your producers and directors happy that you have the expertise as a licensing company to go and get the clearances that they need when they need it. And competitive wise, yes, I think it is. And I also say Pandora and Spotify. And I have to be really honest. If I was trying to find something, I go to Spotify myself.
Mm-hmm.
I most certainly am a registered user with Spotify and with Pandora, and those things seem to be a lot easier. And if I was a supervisor or let's say a director, and I had written a feature film, and it just got picked up by Paramount, and I would I'd go around and go, well, here are the 10 songs that I heard on Spotify that I want, and I'm finding that everybody's becoming their own supervisors because a lot of times that's what's happening. And then they can go direct or just Google, go right to the artists themselves, or they could go right to, very simply to the ASCAPs and BMIs and CSACs, and they can go in and fill out a license request, and they can do the same thing. So from where I'm sitting in for my expertise in publishing and licensing, for synchronization and for masters, I'm finding that, pretty much anybody can do it. And that might be more of the issue do than anything else today, because there's just such a mass way to digitally get music. I mean, in 2003, honestly, I mean, you might have had, Napster and a few other things, but I mean, we went to mp3.com. My partner, my tech guy that I went to high school with, launched Madonna.com and WarnerBrothers.com and said, I know how to do this. I know how to digitize this through MP3 format, and we can deliver back. And again, a year before iTunes launched, we were like, this is what we can do. So at the time, it was interesting, and we could get there faster, and we knew what was going on. Now we are, again, just another line in the water in the huge ocean of what is going on. And I think that's what it is. There's just so much more music, so many digital means and ways to get it, learn about it, hear about it. And so, we're not so unique anymore. But I'm positive. I'm still not. I'm not being not positive about it. I'm just saying that things have vastly changed, in the last 14 years. It's just definitely come a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I licensed my own, like the first time I ever licensed one of my own songs was in 2002, and it seemed like back then it was much easier to sort of break into licensing. I sent a song to my then publisher. It was the first song I ever licensed, and within like 3 weeks, it was on television on an episode of The Young and the Restless. And it seems like over the years, gradually more and more writers enter this space, more publishers, more libraries. And like you said, it's just a vastly different landscape than it was back then.
Yeah, I mean, you even have things like Pump Audio that was sold to the Getty, and the Getty is amassing music, and they're right there in the middle of Hollywood, of course, in California, in the center of the whole thing. And so you've got companies like this, but what we don't ever do is make people digital blips and numbers, and and again, we want a personality. I've always openly, you can click a link and go right back to the artist's webpage. I don't want to have them come in as 0019A7 as a track number. And I had a lot of scurrying and trying to track down usage of music where somebody's like, I was on an episode of something on MTV, and they use, I know it's my music and I got no credit for it, and I don't understand. And the bottom line is one of the first questions I asked, there were certain companies, not to diss Pump Audio, but I would, because they're neighbors of ours in upstate New York and I know them. I'm like, well, did this run through Pump Audio? And they said yes. I said, did you read your agreement? Do you understand that they own and control the publishing, they own and control this and that, they can retitle? And that's the other key word, retitling, because I do not retitle. The song is registered and copywritten. The copyrights and royalties belong to all the artists that we work with. I don't get involved with that. And see, that's another thing that happened. People just go, oh, here's a whole stock catalog that I have, do whatever you want with it, just get it placed. I want to have it heard. But I don't think that helps anybody. And when you're getting paid pennies on the placement, and you can't track back to this artist. You love the song and you're trying to find it and you can't, and you're trying to find the artist to maybe use more of his or her music and you can't. And so I see a lot of things that have really changed in sort of end usage and what is going on. And I've spoken at different symposiums for different Society of Composers, right down to NARIS. I've spoken on panels at ASCAP and CSAC and BMI. I just say, hold on to your titles, don't retitle, keep things non-exclusive. Again, it's another line in the water, and be positive about it. And it's very, very difficult. I mean, right now, I'll use Hollywood Reporter and IMDb Pro and try to constantly keep on top of what is new. There's definitely a new episodic coming out right now that's shooting for the next 2 years in New York, which I'm on top of. I mean, there's things you got to keep. Artists, composers like yourself, I would just say to have a relationship with a company like ourselves, or companies that you're associated with, to go back and go, oh, such and such is shooting, and I know they're doing pre-production, and it's down the street. I heard such and such is directing. Could you go after that and find out what they need for music? Anything you can do, reading Hollywood Reporter yourself, looking and seeing what's in pre-production, in production. all those things are incredibly helpful to get out in front of the mass of what's going to happen at the end. And I even think, for the most part, it used to be, unless you were a label or a publisher, a major film company wouldn't listen. I think a lot of people, like you're just expressing, independently can get to these productions. I mean, I know the Dropkick Murphys really well, and when shipping up to Boston in the movie The Departed, they were down on the docks. They were working that day. They had a CD in their car, and they went in and handed it off to one of the crew. And they didn't have anybody actively place that song. Meaning they didn't have a publisher, and they didn't have their label or their manager. Their manager was out in Los Angeles, who was a friend of mine. I know the story that they just walked in and said, "Oh, hey, I've got the CD in my car. Why don't you take a listen? We're from Boston. The Departed is filmed in Boston. Go ahead." And the band themselves just put it in their faces. And you know what? It's sort of, as you know, how competitive. It's almost like you got to do everything you possibly can do. And I don't, it used to be like that would irritate, people, but I just think right now, if the song is right and it's good, and you've made an effort to get it in front of said people, go for it. I mean, it's really it is really that competitive, So
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. My producer and I sort of joke about how you almost have to be sort of a Superman in the music industry these days. You really have to play and take on a lot of roles. You really have to market your music. You have to produce it well. You have to, in many cases, manage yourself. It's a lot of work, which leads me to my next question. And this is a question I'm sort of asking everybody that I'm interviewing on my podcast. And the question is, with all that said, with everything you just said, do you think making a living licensing music is a viable career path? Is it realistic to go into this hoping to make a full-time living?
I hate to be, a bearer of bad news, but I don't really think so. I mean, I think that every band that I work with, even like the OK Go's that I've done Adobe and HP ad placements for, I mean, these guys are constantly shooting video, being ultra creative with the things that they're doing, and they're touring, and they're doing, work actually in Asia a lot and everything else. I mean, it's like it can't be one element of music. The music's got to be promoted in many different ways. I mean, one of the things I do to consult right now to gain new high-level artists, and also to supplement my living in licensing, is I book for Madison Square Garden, and I book the anthems and halftime shows for the Knicks and the Rangers, for the NHL and NBA, and I'm meeting new artists every single day. Just worked with a Disney star, Annalisa Vanderpool, last night, who's moving to LA to continue with a Disney episodic series. And I even said to her, "Do you have music yourself that you're putting, in this episodic for Disney?" And she's just like, "No, I really don't. It's really difficult, But however, I'll take in CDs of major people that I'm working with. Like it could be anybody from a Chick Corea right down to a Cyndi Lauper or Joan Jett. Joan Jett came in to do the national anthem and came in with an arsenal of CDs that she controls and she owns, and we've got. So I did that also to meet and continue, nurturing the company and making connections as well. Sadly, I think you kind of have to do a couple of other things, like if you producing other artists and being able, if you had a studio, to be able to bring other people in and charge a daily rate or something like that. It's very hard, I think, just to say, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, I know that there are stock houses. I mean, there are companies, especially in and around Los Angeles, that have people full time, and they might only get $300 a track, but they know that they can do, one or two a day, and that's kind of how it goes. But to be at home independently, I mean, I would love to ask you the question. I mean, what have you? Is there a trick to the trade, or have you heard differently? Do you think, yes, this is a very viable career right now? From that you're seeing it from a completely different side that I'm seeing it. Maybe you, as an artist and composer, do understand how this all works a lot better.
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's interesting in the sense that when I ask that question, I get a lot of different responses, and you're certainly not the first person to say, know that it's very difficult to make a full-time living. So my take on it, just from working with different songwriters and interviewing all these different people in the business, is that it's certainly possible. And by that I mean there are people that survive off of licensing income. But like you said, it's very difficult, and I think it's becoming increasingly more difficult, which is really sort of my mission with this podcast and website, is to show musicians a way to at least make, a good part-time income from licensing. But yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, I know a handful of musicians that definitely make what would be considered a full-time living, but it seems like you really, really have to hustle. And I think it takes, the other thing I should sort of mention is that it usually takes years, multiple 3, 4, 5 years to really build it up to the point where you can live off it.
Right, and you're talking. I mean, the question was about licensing and placement of music, and living full time off of that. And you're talking about like without doing sessions, without touring, without going out live, without selling merchandise. You're talking about strictly licensing and placement of your music. Exactly.
Because I work with a lot of musicians who don't necessarily want to tour. Maybe they're a little bit older and they just want to. It seems like a lot of musicians turn to licensing to sort of monetize their music and not necessarily tour behind it. But obviously what I'm hearing from you, and maybe you can, confirm this, is that you really, realistically, you probably need to tour, to really bring in it seems like it's more about multiple revenue streams. Is that what you're saying?
Well, or this, ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC, they all do showcases. They all do, for instance, ASCAP sits at the Tribeca Film Festival, BMI sits at the Woodstock Film Festival. The film festivals, getting out, being in front of directors. I mean, if you're a singer-songwriter and you've got an arsenal of new songs, and to be able to get a little bit of a showcase with one of your PROs, not a bad idea. Maybe that's not about money, but maybe it's just about getting out of your studio and being seen, meeting people. I find that, sometimes, I like going to the film festivals for that very reason, because you do meet a lot of writers. You are there with of course, with the producers and directors, and you've got to be out. So, I mean, to stay in your studio and to say, oh, this song's going to get picked up and placed, and I'm going to make, hundreds or thousands of dollars, and this is how I'm going to live. I'm being really, the devil's advocate to say, I think that's not really realistic. But, if you had a really good music supervisor, for instance, and there's a whole bunch of them, I work with, and I personally know, like the Sue Jacobs and the George Draculises of the world. I mean, if you got in good with one of those guys, perhaps, I mean, and Sue Jacobs does manage some composers and stuff like that too. So, I mean, you could have that really lucky day where just a supervisor falls in love and just you're the go-to person, and that's what happens. I mean, that's that is all in all possible, but it is sort of the diamond in the rough and trying to do that. But I would suggest that if I understand not getting in a van and going around the world, but if you just in your local communities see where the closest film festivals are, keep in touch with your PROs and ask, like, are you doing any writers rounds? Are you doing any showcases? Are you doing any film festivals where I could be seen and heard by people? And I don't believe in paying money to do that. Like, coming in, you don't have to be paid, but also, I think people might put together things and say, oh, you have to pay to be a part of this and to be seen by these people. I mean, I don't like any of that either. I think just talking to your PROs and understanding what's in the community that you could do that is film, television, and documentary related, where you can be with other creatives and be seen and heard by them freely, and get some extra added exposure would be great. I mean, I really implore speaking with your PROs, and that's the other thing too. Everybody who's composing should be registered with one of those, so royalties are collected, broadcast royalties are collected properly. At the end of the day, those cue sheets are submitted, and you're getting the money that you're due. I had to have people coming back at me going, I was in all these episodes during blah 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 season on, I don't know what, logo or something. And I'll be like, well, okay, what PRO are you with? Well, I'm not. And I'm like, well, how do you expect these broadcast royalties to be collected? So, there's the sort of the 101 of music licensing, which I'm sure you're very, very aware of. But swinging all back around to that, it's a really good thing to be, registered. You have to be, and also to ask for help, to go online and see what they're doing locally. I know it's very difficult if you live maybe somewhere in the Midwest, but you never know. I mean, there could be some kind of interesting festival going on, or they could be doing a writer's round, or you might just want to take yourself to Nashville or Los Angeles or Chicago or New York and get out and sort of put a little bit of your budget into being somewhere to be seen and heard, and pass out business cards and that kind of thing. That's what I'd recommend. But you kind of have to do everything, hit the ground running, and run in a lot of different directions these days, to make that living.
Absolutely. What about things like commercials and advertisements? Do you do any ad work, Suzanne?
I do ad work, and I'm very. It was interesting. And back in the beginning of the day, I'd be at Young and Rubicon, or I'd be at Saatchi, or any of the companies I was even doing with Draft FCB. They would let me come in and do writer showcases. Like, there was a song back in the 90s called "I Love You Always Forever" by Donna Lewis, and one of the guys was from Ireland and knew, because she was from Wales, said, "Oh my gosh, I love that song. She was on Atlantic Records. Could you come up and do a showcase with her during lunchtime? I have about 50 executives in music placement, and can we go ahead and do something like that?" So I did a whole bunch of those things at the advertising agencies in New York. And, I found with all the effort and the money and the time, and for, Donna to get a couple of her musicians together and bring everything in and pay for parking and do everything like this, at the end of the day, it was few and far between what we got. I all of a sudden, with a San Francisco company, got a call one day about OK Go. And from that, it was like, well, we're looking for 10 things for Adobe. We're looking for, 5 things for HP printers. We're doing this and we're doing that. And here's the budget. And so they started pulling a lot of, like a band I have called the Sound Awake. The Sound Awake is in Nashville, more composer driven. They're not really real. They don't even tour. They loved them. And they took sort of the bigger things we had and then jumped in and said, well, what independent bands do you have that are up-tempo, that are bright, that are innovative, that might be colorful to listen to, that would help, that when you were watching this ad that you would like. And so, I do have a couple of really good resources, and it might be only quarterly. It might be every couple of months I'll get a call and I'll get the list. But I'm happy to say that, over the past few years, HP and Adobe have kept me and my artists very happy, because we're able to do that. What I'm also noticing too with advertising, a lot of times they're web campaigns. They're paying well, but they're not paying what major network would pay. They're taking their budgets and they're streaming it out across web and World Wide Web. They're using it as point of purchase in stores, getting to customers that way, versus, let's say, the big deal ad for the Super Bowl. They're not. They're spreading out their monies. So I'm happy, because maybe they wouldn't be working with me directly. They would be going to a big time advertising company otherwise. But, so yes, I dabble with that. I've been called in by Apple and I've gone at and run at a bunch of ads for major things. And, sadly, I'd be really close and thinking something was going to happen, and then it doesn't. And, but I just, you don't try, you don't pitch, you don't make a run at it. And I'm very quick about how I deliver things, and they're pre-cleared, and I know what the realm of the budget is, and I think for the most part people do like working with us, and just we're professional, and I've mostly been in this business since the 80s. So one of the first licenses I did was Rags to Riches by Tony Bennett for Goodfellas and Scorsese. So that's when I saw working for Tony Bennett, like, wow, there is really a living. I thought there was a big living to be had in like 1989, 1990. I saw this as being tremendous, but of course that was Tony Bennett, and it was just interesting. But that's when the light bulb went off with me, and I couldn't stop thinking, like, wow, this every film has music, every ad has music, every network show has music. I mean, it seems like you could make a fortune from it, but there's so many more people doing it today. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to get into this. What was it like, by the way, working with Tony Bennett? That must have been amazing.
Oh, it was. It was 5 of the best years of my life, and it was interesting 'cause from a management perspective. It was, everything from worldwide tours and, doing advertising campaigns with him. I mean, he did things for The Gap and for Burberry, and it was working. Oh, the biggest thing I did was with Matt Groening and The Simpsons. There is a Chrome we had in our office because Tony, when I was with him, did do The Simpsons, and then he also was sitting at MTV Music Awards with Flea and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So, I mean, that was just like the 101 of music. It was just really tremendous, to be able to amass that. And also that's where I got the connections for song placement to labels, because I met, pretty much, everybody from the Tommy Mottolas down to the Clive Davises. And so when I went independently to work for myself, I had met all those people through him. So yeah, and he's an incredible person. I know he just turned 90, but he's just super dynamic, and everything he looks like he is. Like, people will say, is he really that nice? I said he's nicer. I mean, he's just
Wow.
such a sweetheart and really good guy. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, he seems like such a class act, and he's still going. He's still going strong at 90 years old. It's amazing. It's inspirational to watch him.
It is, and I think it was just a great thing, that his son and he came up with, connecting with the Amy Winehouses and the Lady Gagas, and to be able to cross over like that, it is inspirational, and he's a very, he comes off very young, and for the years I was with him, I mean, he played tennis pretty much every day, and just was a very conscious, health person, and just a good person, and I think what goes around comes around karmically. And he's just he has been and is a really good person, and I hope he's got another 90 years ahead of him. I mean, he's just a great person, and a great performer.
Yeah, he's amazing. There's this great quote in the documentary about Amy Winehouse. He was in that documentary. It's just called
Yes,
Amy.
at the end, yeah.
But did you see that? But the quote was...
I did, and my publicist is her publicist, Tracy Miller and Associates. It's TMA. So Tracy's actually in that when they were doing the photo session. She's got very short blonde hair, but yeah, I was very close to that documentary. What quote are you thinking of?
Well, no, there's a quote that just resonated with me, and it was something Tony Bennett said in the documentary. He said, "If you live long enough, life teaches you how to live." And he was sort of referring to the, it was tragic, obviously, that Amy Winehouse died so young. But the idea is that if you keep going, eventually life will sort of show you how to live. And for some reason, that quote just always stuck with me.
You know what? It's interesting. That went right over my head. But now you're saying that it's true, and I mean, he's the veteran, so he can speak from that. And what a sad thing, since she didn't survive. She had a lot left to learn. Definitely. But that this, and even like the way she blew up and everything. I'm finding artists today just don't even blow up as fast, as quickly. I mean, the success, like even a Nora Jones, who could out of the box sell 7 million records or something like that in the first couple of weeks. I mean, I keep pointing out to September 11th. I find in this 21st century, things have just been a lot slower. Things aren't going like 20 times platinum as quickly as they used to do, and it's just I don't understand, even for regular traditional artists today, how it's just a little bit more difficult. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the one thing we can all agree on in this industry is that the music business has changed dramatically over the course of the last 10 to 20 years, which leads me to my final question for you. And this is another question that I'm asking everybody that I'm bringing on the podcast, and in particular people like you, Suzanne, who have been in this business for a while. And the question is, what are your feelings about the future of the music business? From where we are currently in 2017, looking forward, how do you feel about the music business right now? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? Where do you think we're headed?
Well, I'm optimistic because I'm finding that through independence, the music is getting better and better. I'm finding we're not at any lack for amazing singers and songwriters and composers. I'm just finding that without the control and handcuffs of A&R and the big labels and the Sonys and everybody and I've been with plenty of artists in studios that were being told what they could and couldn't do. I mean, I feel optimistic that music is going to be more innovative. I mean, if we thought like a Beck, an artist like spec or something was really innovative, and with programming, with all sorts of sampling, with all sorts. I just think we're going to see more and more. Even I'm just finding that simply with a GarageBand type of program that Apple, everybody's Macs, and I'm sure a lot of PC-based programs as well are making it very simple for people to be musicians at home and do it themselves, the DIY. They don't have to pay thousands of dollars a day to a studio. So I'm thinking, that the industry right now is going to creatively just get better and better, and we're going to start hearing and seeing things we've never even imagined. And I think it's going to be audio-visual mix. I think what's going to happen is like how we thought, like, oh wow, OK Go did some cool videos. I'm seeing a lot of interesting videos coming from people through iMovie and things like that, going, wow, how did they do this? Graphically, digitally, 3D, in animation, things that are coming up. And that's the other thing, too, which is interesting with YouTube, that people can go ahead and create all sorts of audiovisual things, post to YouTube, gain a massive following, actually make money through that. If they have millions and millions of views, that's even better. Put some kittens in it or something, I'm thinking that I think we haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg of what's going to happen just in terms of technology in music and what's going to happen and what will get us further out there. And I actually think that there will be more end users. So there's got to be other things that music's going to be used for. I'm not quite sure, even myself, what that is. But I feel very optimistic about it. But I do think that we have to do a little bit more than just sit in a studio. I think there is a lot of marketing and meetings and events and things that people need to, or have a person like a manager go to sort of be seen and heard and keep their ear to it. But even just, I would say, just online, boy, you can find out a lot of information on what's going on, through the Hollywood Reporters and the IMDb pros and stuff. I'm sure you've got a lot of other sources as well, maybe that you recommend to people you work with. And that's probably going to be more and more easy to get a hold of. I think even right now, to even get an address or a phone number of a producer, like a Will Ferrell, for instance, 10 years ago, you couldn't do that. Now anybody can do it. You could most certainly
go to Google,
reach out to people.
Yeah,
Google is just the god. It really find out the info and get in front of people. I want to listen to more of your podcast and get some tips myself. I'm sure you've learned so much in your interviews, and I most certainly am not the be all end all. I'm sure there's a lot of information out there that would be very useful from your podcast.
Absolutely, and that's why I love doing this so much, because I feel like every time I do an interview with somebody like you, it's like I sort of get another piece to the puzzle. And it's the awesome thing is, like, people like you have been so gracious in terms of agreeing to come on my podcast. So I appreciate you doing this with me today. And one final question for you, just something popped in my head when you were talking about OK Go. Didn't they, if I recall correctly, wasn't it through a music video that they posted on YouTube that sort of blew up and put them on the map in the first place?
Yeah, I don't want to be really necessarily quote on this, but like the treadmill dance, that was one of the first ones that I ever saw in there was synchronized treadmill dancing, 4 of them in a row, and I knew people in Rufus Wainwright's camp and went to see Rufus Wainwright, and at the time my kids were quite young; they might have been, I don't know, like 9 and 11 or something, and we didn't know that they were like being dragged to Rufus Wainwright, which, I mean, they like Rufus, but that's not their forte at 9 and 11. But OK Go opened, and they didn't have the treadmills, but they did a sync dance about around that time. And then the kids went home and they were, on the internet and found that, and through them also I learned a lot about new music and what was going on. But yeah, I mean, they right now just did a thing for, I want to say, a Chinese furniture company, because I'm friends with their manager, and they were in China. So if you Google them now, they're out in little go-karts and going around couches and chairs, and like they the world. I mean, they through their video, their music has been embraced by all corners of the world, of people bringing them over, flying them in to do this sort of stuff because of their video creations. They also do things with kabuki screens, because I've seen some recent shows where they drop down kabuki screens and are digitizing, their visuals. So in fact, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I could see concerts right now being completely robust and, very dynamic, and you would feel like you're getting your money's worth, and the artist isn't even there, that it's all digitally, holographically transmitted, and the music is as pure and great as it could possibly be. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's what they're doing, but in their show, they have an element of that where they disappear. And I think we're going to see a little bit more of that lighting, LED, this kind of stuff. But anyway, that all goes back to the video as well. But yeah, that's right. I do believe one of the first, or one of the ones that really resonated with me, was that treadmill video.
Yeah, for sure. I remember that video. They have some others that are it seems like everything they do video-wise is very creative. And I think that's what you need to do in this day and age. Like we've talked about in this podcast, there's a lot of competition. A lot of people want to make music. But if you can set yourself apart, be a little more creative than the next artist, seems like that's kind of what you need to do. So on that note, Suzanne, I want to thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And I want to tell people where they can find out more about you. And your website is wacbiz.com, correct?
Right, WACBIZ.com, and I'm on Facebook just under me. It's Suzanne, SUZANNE, Hilleary, HILLEARY, and I'm always posting fun things. I have Victor Wooten coming in on Monday for Anthem and Halftime Show, him and his bass and his guys, and so I've already posted that, going happy MLK Day, see you at the Garden, New York Knicks on Monday with them. And so if people go to Facebook, they can sort of follow me there. Hey, anthem singers and composers or new indie bands, I mean, we book halftime shows and we do emerging artists all the time. I mean, you don't have to be a star to perform at Madison Square Garden. And a lot of times it's a bucket list dream of people's. And that's the other thing too, taking artists and some emerging bands, and to be able to give them that opportunity to be in front of 22,000 people, that's just another dynamic way of marketing and getting out there. So, I'm there and very interested, and people can always reach out to me through Facebook as well.
Very cool, everybody. So go check out, connect with Suzanne on Facebook. And again, the website is Wacbiz, WACBIZ.com. Suzanne, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Keep in touch, and I'll wait to get an email from you to hear about when this is going to come out.
I will, for sure. When it's ready, I will send it to you. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you so much, and everybody should tune in to you. And I'm going to listen to some more of your podcast as well, because we all have something to learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Take care. Bye bye.